Yeah, gotta get ready. Hello, everyone. I'm Jenna Paone. Welcome to Lit Chick on a Mighty Blaze. I'm so thrilled to have the wonderful Suzanne Park here today to talk about her latest novel, So We Meet Again. Hey, Suzanne, how are you doing?
Oh, it's upside down. Hi. I need coffee this morning. That's how I'm feeling. Yes. Hello.
I love it. I know it's early for you. Suzanne's on the West Coast. We're dragging her up, making her put on her interview face at 9 a.m. for her. But we're so thrilled that you joined us today. We can't wait to talk about this book. I say we. I'm like using the royal we here. Like, who am I? Like, I'm so thrilled to talk to you. And I know our viewers are going to be so thrilled to hear about this book too. It's such a fun, comforting, really, mouth-watering read that makes it like it's impossible to read this book without getting hungry. I was like, I need some Korean barbecue and some chicken wings right now as soon as I read this. Such a great book, so fun. I'm going to start off by just introducing you to everyone, and then we'll dive into some questions.
Sounds great.
Great. So Suzanne Park is a Korean-American writer who was born and raised in Tennessee. In her former life as a stand-up comedian, Suzanne was a finalist in the Oxygen Network's Girls Behaving Badly talent search and appeared on BET's Coming to the Stage. She was also the winner of the Seattle Sierra Mist comedy competition and was a semi-finalist in NBC's Stand Up for Diversity showcase in San Francisco. Suzanne graduated from Columbia University and received her MBA from UCLA. She was selected for Pitch Wars, and she currently resides in Los Angeles with her husband, female offspring, and a sneaky rat that creeps around on her back patio. In her spare time, she procrastinates, which is maybe my favorite bio line ever, which is like, I'm like, yep, me too. Yep, same. Her YA romantic comedy debut, The Perfect Escape, and her adult rom-com debut, Loathe at First Sight, were released in 2020. Suzanne's latest release, So We Meet Again, follows a young Korean-American woman trying to launch a new business and find her voice while dodging the sometimes overwhelming expectations of her family and trying to not fall for her childhood rival. Emily Henry, a #1 New York Times bestselling author, says it's a cinematic, charming heart squeeze of a book that has found its way to my ultimate comfort reads shelf, which of course we love Emily here. And we chatted with her about both People We Meet on Vacation and Beach Read. And an Emily Henry endorsement is like, that's the gold standard. And you gotta pick up the book if Emily tells you to. And Kirkus Reviews calls it a charming contemporary romance with heart, humor, and home cooking. The plot is packed with mirth and mouth-watering meal descriptions, and the book addresses the heavier subjects of workplace sexism and racism with deftness and care. Booklist calls it breezy and funny, a classic love-hate tale to wrap up the summer. Suzanne, welcome, and congratulations again on the release of So We Meet Again.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a wonderful release week, and I'm so glad to be here with you today.
Yay! We are, oh my gosh. I mean, #1, we have to talk. I kind of want to talk about this right off the bat that this is your fourth book that you're releasing throughout the pandemic.
Yeah.
I really was it's so unusual from you have stormed on the scene and you're killing it, and you're releasing YA and you're releasing adult rom-coms, and you're just doing it. What has this experience been like for you of releasing all of your books?
I was trying to do the math, and so The Perfect Escape, my YA debut, came out April of 2020. And if you fast forward to now, #4, that's is it 16 months time period? No, yeah. I don't know if I'm doing the math right, but it feels like, I think it's 16 months. So it's been pretty wild to just do releases back to back, and in a pandemic, no less, where at the beginning when you're with your fellow debuts and, sharing knowledge, and everybody's just winging it. To be honest, right now. And there was no institutional knowledge of here's what you do should there be a global pandemic, and here's the manual. We're all figuring it out in 2020 and 2021 rolling into that. It's hard to believe that we're here, but book #4 came out. But I am happy. So We Meet Again held the correct way. Right Side Up is out now, because I wrote that particular book to be a comfort write for me, because I was writing it last year in the summer, and I wanted it to just have themes and scenes, everything, just to be this heartwarming kind of squishy read. And I wrote it knowing that I wanted whoever's reading it to have like a comfort read that they can say that they read in the pandemic and it made them feel good.
Well, 100% you have achieved that, because I mean, I could not stop smiling as I read this book. It really is just like a dose of happiness. It's like much needed levity and much needed comfort, but also you don't, it feels very of the time. And I want to get to this in a second, because I think you've done something very interesting that other authors can learn from, of how to handle what we're going through collectively as a society with this book. But first, can you just tell us a little bit about So We Meet Again? Just a little rundown. Obviously, we never do any spoilers, but just a little rundown of the story and what inspired you to write it.
Yeah, sure. So We Meet Again is about an overworked investment banker. She's Korean American. Her name is Jessie Kim, and she is laid off on Zoom. And she has to figure out career-wise what she wants to do. So she decides to move back home to Tennessee with her mom and dad. She's in her childhood bedroom and figuring out her career. And while she's at home, she's running and getting groceries for her mother at the Asian grocery store, and runs into her childhood nemesis, her middle school arch rival named Daniel Choi. And of course, back then she already disliked him, but now she's found out that he is like, really successful, and he's tall and he's strapping. And she just is like, I cannot believe, like, I'm at literally rock bottom, and this guy has like this fancy car and he's here. Of course he would be here. Yeah. So she decides to, after a lot of thinking and kind of, soul searching, she decides to restart her YouTube cooking show, which was called Hangulkex. It is the show that she developed, and it's basically taking meal kits and hacking them to have Asian and Korean flavors. And she takes it to YouTube and starts a series online, and due to a series of mishaps, she ends up kind of having to go into business with her mother. So it was just like a fun story to write. And I, again, wanted it to be a comfort read. And when I had originally conceived this idea, it was actually totally different. I had actually wanted this to be a workplace comedy with romance, much like my debut from last year, and wanted it to take place on Wall Street. And I wanted to show the day-to-day interactions of how women are treated, how Asian American women are treated in the workplace there. And once the pandemic hit, though, there was no workplace, and the office was no longer. And I didn't know what that would look like in a year when I knew this book would come out. So I had to rethink the whole thing, and it kind of ended up sort of where it did now, and I'm really happy with the outcome.
I mean, I love it, and I want to point out what I was saying earlier, that you've done something really interesting. I think you found like kind of a secret of like how to handle, like, we're all going through this like collective trauma of the pandemic, and our entire society is different, right? And it's really strange as a writer to sit down and go, well, do I still write this book that A, has nothing to do with the pandemic, or B, is like pandemic centric? And it's an odd thing. And I think what you've done very cleverly in So We Meet Again is you've taken the challenges that we're all kind of experiencing of having our lives completely uprooted and having our plans go completely awry, maybe like finding ourselves like back at home or in a different place than we thought we would be living, or out of the city, or out of, all these things like that we've experienced, having to start over from scratch and revamp things, and dealing with Zoom and dealing with this new world. And you've put them in this context where the pandemic doesn't exist in your world, but a lot of the things that we use now exist in your book, like the Zoom meeting firing, and the grocery apps, and like the constant kind of stuff. And I think you've done it really cleverly. Was that something that you it sounds like, yes, that's something that you were like, well, the world is different, so how do I make this like accessible to readers today? Like, is that like, was that at the forefront of your mind as you wrote this?
Yes, I tend to. There's a point of the pandemic where I was like, I just need to start finding the humor
Yeah,
in the actual pandemic life. My former life, a long time ago, was as a stand-up comic, and a lot of that is observational humor.
yeah,
And so I really tried to bring it to this novel where I was like, I got to talk about things. I don't want to be so on the nose with talking about
yeah,
the panini, but I wanted to make sure that I folded in things that people can definitely relate to now
yeah,
in 2021 when they're reading this book, and it will feel very topical. And with this book, I was just like, how do I bring things in that I do on a day-to-day basis?
yeah.
It'd be sort of therapeutic to write about, but also
Mhm.
just like what parts of it can bring humor to everybody's daily life. So
Yeah,
as you mentioned, I brought in the humor around grocery store apps,
mhm,
like the idea
yeah,
that just comes up in the novel, and this is a lot of it's based on my own experience too. Is kind
yeah,
of like, how can I take what happened to me and just make it like more
yeah,
ridiculous? So with the grocery store apps, I just thought it was pretty funny to there's this free form section in most grocery store apps where you can leave instructions.
yeah.
And so I just said, what could be the weirdest thing she could ask somebody to do when they're delivering groceries? So those are the types of things that I did. It was like, I can take this thing that is very common in the pandemic,
Yep,
meal kits, for example. I tried
yeah,
6 or 7 of them.
yep,
And, and that's how I got the idea actually,
yeah,
just from that
that's cool.
experience to bring that in as a business idea. And it
Mhm.
was because I was hacking my own meal kits myself because they were like in my fridge and I'd forget a day and then they would keep piling up and I had to quickly use the ingredients.
Yeah,
And again, just taking these sort of real experiences and then finding the joy and humor in the
mhm,
day to day of it, and then seeing what could work in this novel. So some things,
yeah,
most of the things that I put in stayed in. And again, as you point out, the biggest pivotal thing for the main character is her having to move back home after she's laid off
yeah,
and having to live under the roof with her parents who she
mhm,
hasn't like lived with in over 10 years.
yeah. I mean, it's pretty crazy as somebody who actually is living with their entire extended family, like right now, basically, like next door to each other. Like it's a trip, right? Like
It's
all
a,
of a sudden you're like, this is a very different like thing of like having
yeah,
our lives uprooted in this way.
right. Like
And
you're an adult,
I found it
but
I found it very relatable. Like all those little family dynamics. I want to talk about because you mentioned something that this was intended to be um, a workplace centric book, and I really think it is, and I love it because I mean, I love where we're going with rom-coms as a like in books. Like I love where we're going in every sense. I love the change in female protagonists. I love the change in the relationships. We're going to talk about all of this. I also love how work is at the forefront of the book because for so many of us women today, work is at the forefront of our lives. And it's interesting. And we often have, multiple career paths. I know you have a background in business, you have an MBA, you come from this world and made the transition to a creative career. And that's not unlike how Jessie Kim transitions from her investment banking job to entrepreneurship. So a little bit like what inspired you to kind of, focus on career with this book, and how, if at all, was it influenced by your personal experience?
oh, I love this question, this type of question, because it's like, oh, where do I start with
Yeah.
this? Again, this book was so different than again how I imagined it.
Mhm.
And if I'd written a whole outline or something, I would have had to toss the whole thing out.
Yeah.
But the idea came from actually having dinner and drinks with some of my friends who work on Wall Street,
Mhm.
and they're female bankers,
Yeah.
and they were just telling me about the day-to-day occurrences that they
Mhm.
had to deal with, both micro and macro aggressions
Yep.
in the workplace.
Yep.
And when I just was listening to their stories and what they kind of let slide and what they hadn't really
Yeah.
had glossed over as like not a big deal, to me was a big deal. And so
Yeah.
a lot of the stories that you see in there once I knew, I was like, okay, I have to talk about this. I cannot let this go. And because I was like, how are you not outraged about how women are treated on Wall Street? And they're like, oh, this is just how it's always been.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's not, I cannot accept that. So when I knew I wanted to write about Wall Street and write about banking, and specifically around a character who is doing a great job, but but is underestimated and undervalued. And
Yeah.
I feel like what I was hearing when I was doing a lot of interviews with a lot of people that were in the banking industry, both women and men, was that a lot of women are just dismissed, sometimes just from appearance, or just because they become moms or whatever. They just literally like just have these stereotypes,
Yep.
and they just are completely the whole industry is like this. And I just knew this was something that I wanted to talk about very openly. Last year, I had a book about the gaming industry, and actually, currently, there's this huge explosion in this kind of exposure to what the gaming industry is like, because one of the biggest game studios is being
Yeah.
sued. And so I was like, okay, so I was, I had that book come out, and then this one felt like it was in the same family, as far as male-dominated work environments that have gotten away with a lot, and it just needs to stop. So that was the impetus for actually writing on that subject matter. But as far as like why I felt like what I wanted to incorporate into this book, when it comes to her career, was I was actually an entrepreneur a long time ago, and I haven't really talked about that too much in interviews. But I, set aside my corporate life and then tried entrepreneurship. Specifically, I designed and produced these eco-friendly laptop bags and work accessories. And
Cool.
so a lot of the things that she is dealing with, like the invoicing and the shipping and all of the things just not working out because of like the box is not coming or whatever it is. It's these are all things that happen to real small business owners that are, in their garage packing stuff up and shipping it out and taking it to like FedEx, or, hoping that the mail guy comes that day. And so I just really thought that that was something that people could relate to now, as people are just trying to figure out what they want to do. I think the current situation, the global panini, has given us a lot of time to think about what we want to do and what makes us happy. And I think that was something that I just wanted to touch on in this novel.
Yeah. I mean, I think you do that very well. And I'm not surprised to hear that you have experience with entrepreneurship, with starting and running your own business, because the details were like so correct feeling as somebody who has not started their own business. Like, I was like, wow, I'm very impressed by this, like this back end. Like I come from a family where everyone else is in business or banking or entrepreneur. Like everybody else is like in the business world. And I'm like, oh, this feels correct. Like, I'm like, oh yeah. I get this. Like, but I'm not surprised to hear that, number one. And one thing that I love is this idea of reinventing yourself. And clearly you're somebody who's reinvented yourself multiple times over. I'm the same way. And I really, and I think some people look at it as a negative. I really see it as a positive, of this gradual evolution of like, who are you becoming? And who you are at 35 is not who you were at 30, and is not who you were at 25, and is not who you were at 20. And we go through these different phases of life and what is right for us at the time. I'm very interested in your own journey from business, from corporate world to entrepreneurship to stand-up comedy to writing that clearly is comedic. Can you talk a little bit about your personal journey and kind of what made you decide to step away from, the business of running a product and kind of making yourself the product and your creative energy the product? What was that like for you, and what kind of prompted you to make that change?
It was hard. It was hard. I have to think that a lot of it stems from similar themes that are running through this book, which is you have parental expectations
Yeah.
And when your vision is different than your parents' vision, how do you reconcile that?
Yeah.
And I think from, since when I could barely talk, my parents have, had certain ideas of what my career should look like, and how that should,
Yeah.
my schooling should go, and then after that, after I
Yeah.
graduate, what work should look like.
Yeah.
And I think that's true with a lot of immigrant parents, that
Yeah.
they have come to this country, and then they
Mhm.
know what they know, and then this is what they are trying to help their children and foster this,
Yeah.
you know uh, almost like an entrepreneurial spirit, to
Mhm.
just go get it, have plenty of grit, and just
Yeah.
hustle. And for some people it works, and I did go that track, but then there are just so many times where I just was not creatively satisfied in my
Mhm.
job. And I
Yeah.
think that a lot of people, you see a lot of novelists that are from other industries, especially lawyers. I see a lot of lawyer novelists these days, but I do wonder, where at what point people have had this sort of desire to be creative
Mhm.
while they were on this other track. And they might have been like book smart, or really good at a thing, but they actually want to do this and are
Mhm.
passionate about this other thing.
Yeah.
So that was sort of what I was faced with,
Mm.
having this sort of fork in the road at all times. I remember even when I applied to business school and got in, I was like, should I even go? Because I
Yeah.
don't even know, like, I know I can do it, and I know
Mhm.
this will lead to kind of career options, but
Yeah.
what is this exactly, is this what I'm supposed to do? And
Yeah.
you're so young when you make these decisions. And then I don't want to say you're stuck with them, but you you do end up like making investments into your own future,
Yeah.
and then those you have to almost pay back.
Yeah.
And so you get your college degree, pay that back. You get a graduate school
Mhm.
degree, you have debt, and then you
Yeah.
just keep having to, run in this, like, it's like a hamster wheel
Yeah.
almost. And so for me, again, always wanted to do something creative. I'd always wanted to be a humor writer.
Mm.
And I didn't know what that looked like, because it's not
Yeah.
like you have college courses called humor writing, or in
Yeah.
high school, like that's a track of any kind. Like,
Yeah.
so I had to kind of figure it out on my own. And
Mhm.
fortunately, I should say, not unfortunately, I ended up thinking that humor writing would come through the path of stand-up comedy.
Yep.
But then I just did that and for 10 years, and then realized, wait, I wasn't supposed to do stand-up comedy. I wanted to do humor writing, and had to rethink that whole thing again.
Mhm.
So I started taking writing classes, and actually tried a lot of type of writing that I was not very good at.
Mhm.
I did a memoir class
Yeah.
in personal essays
Yeah.
and script writing, and then finally ended up where I am now, which is writing fiction. And that's sort of the long-winded way of how I
Mhm.
ended up where I am. But I think it is when you're, faced with, what you're passionate about, but don't quite know what that looks like. You
Yeah.
just know you wanted to be creative and have a creative outlet.
Yeah.
Or you have something, but you don't know how it translates into a
Yeah.
tangible thing. I think a lot of people face that.
Yeah. I love that. Like that your journey is very, very similar to mine, especially like the writing thing of like for years I spent, over a decade in the music industry as a songwriter before figuring out like it's the writing. It's not
Mhm.
necessarily like the format that matters to me. It's the and is this the best way to tell the stories that I want to tell? And it
Mhm.
sounds like you've found the format of the story that is most conducive for the stories that you want to tell, which is really cool.
That's
That
right. When I was doing stand-up, I was, again, it took 10 years for me to kind of realize this,
same,
but
same.
I was basically telling stories and having a punchline at the end of it. So I was a storyteller with a
Yeah,
funny ending, and wrap
yeah,
up that bit of the story and then start on the next thing. I was not this one liner type of comic.
yeah,
And I remember I had a local review in a local blog, like a popular like pop culture blog in Seattle, and the guy had said that, um, if you listen to her setup and you listen to the story, and there's a twist at the end, but you have to kind of be invested in the story part. And it was basically saying I was unlike other comics.
yeah,
I didn't really think about that. I was just like, "What? I'm a comic, I'm like
yeah.
everybody else." But then it wasn't until, again, I was writing stories and
Mhm.
realizing that's kind of what he meant, is like, I'm not your typical joke writer. I am
Yeah.
a comedy writer of some kind. And he's like,
Yeah.
and how would that translate into anything? Luckily, it works in fiction, or hopefully it
Yeah.
works in fiction.
No, it absolutely does. And that's one of the things I always like am more on the comedy bent than I am the tragedy bent, which is an interesting thing. I think it's harder to make somebody laugh than to make them cry. And like I think it's much harder. And I'm interested in whether you found the transition between, writing for performance versus writing for the written page, whether there were any kind of roadblocks in your way or like, a learning curve, and how you kind of dealt with that.
That's a great question. So from even now, even after having written so many long form novels, I have always been short on words. Like first drafts have always been around 50 to 55,000 words. And I have to, in the revision process, add so much. But I know what I'm missing too. It's like, it's like, 50,000 words of dialogue and 5,000 words of description. Like that's usually my balance. It's usually that.
I'm the opposite. I'm like, this is a 500,000 word draft, and like how the heck am I going to pare this down?
Yeah. Like, I wish I was like that, to be honest. I think
I wish I was like you, because I can't edit. Yeah, it's always, the grass is always greener. But but brevity is the soul of wit, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and actually that was kind of a segue into what I was thinking is, when you're writing jokes for a stage, you are basically trying to figure out how to be economic with your words.
Yeah.
And I was, again, I was telling stories on stage. So to really streamline that, it really made it hard. Like every word had to count, and I had to cut out like, filler words and miscellaneous description so that I could get to the punchline faster. Because again, I was realizing that, my way of delivering humor and jokes wasn't like how most people did. And that's a good thing, in that I now know like how to pick and choose words to have a certain rhythm and beat, and follow kind of a certain reveal process as well. But at the same time, it's gotten me to be so economic with words that I end up short all the time. I think maybe if I hadn't done comedy and was just writing, I would probably have a normal word count. But because my brain is always thinking like how to get that thought down in a comedic way, or getting the point across in using brevity, I need to figure that out. And it just ends up way more simple. And I don't want to say thin, but it's basically just basic on paper, and I really need to flesh it out.
That's really cool. I could talk about process all day, but I do want to talk about, so we meet again a little bit more, just to like give, folks a little taste of what they're in for when they pick it up. As I said earlier in our discussion, I love where rom-coms are going. And I want to talk about character for a moment, because, Jess really represents to me the new female heroine, like the new protagonist that we're seeing in rom-coms, which is such a welcome relief after, like, not that I didn't love them before, because I've always loved these books, but I'm so happy to see the format change from this idea of like, this woman needs love, to like, this woman is on a journey to discover who she is. And in the process, if she finds some romance, then awesome. And this is, something that I love. Like Jess is we're really rooting for Jess, and like her journey, it's about her, it's definitely about the romance, and the romance is really, really fun, but it's about her evolution as a person and a fully satisfied like human being with her own, and it's about her relationships with everyone. Like the relationship with Daniel is no more important than her finding, a sense of equilibrium with her relationship with her parents, and finding, a community and a group of friends that she can root for and that will root for her in advance, root for her back. Can you talk a little bit about, why you're centering a woman like this in your books, why this is the type of woman that you are writing about, and specifically how you built Jess in this book?
Jess is a combination of all of the women that I had interviewed for this project, and just hearing these stories of these women who have, despite the odds, climbed up the corporate ladder in investment banking and on Wall Street. It was like taking their stories and hearing how they dealt with stories, with situations at work.
Yeah.
I kind of combine all of that, and so you'll see characters in my book, is this particular book, but also my previous book, where the heroine is resilient, resourceful, but also very like underestimated and has to prove everyone wrong because they are wrong. They've stereotyped and dismissed the main character, and the character's strong-willed and determined, but for whatever reason, the industry that she's in is either underestimating her, it's just not the right fit. And I think I just really wanted to talk about this because I think while women in general have, are treated a certain way in the financial industry, I felt that I really need to talk about the Asian American experience too, because it comes with its own set of stereotypes and problematic, kind of pigeonholing and things that happen to have happened to friends that are slowly getting up the ladder because they're seeing their peers get promoted and they're doing half the amount of work, or they are covering for somebody that actually did a terrible job, and then that person is flourishing at the company. And I wanted Jess to embody these women, but also just I had a vision for her, and these women just kind of helped shape her to be very three-dimensional. And I've had people read the book, and they if they've worked on Wall Street or even in corporate America, I've had a lot of people just message me and say, "Oh my God, this type of thing happened to me," and it's they're in a male-dominated workplace, and these things that I'm bringing up are very real. And that's the thing is, having a character that feels very real and very relatable, I think is one thing that I am trying to do. And I'd like to see women in the workplace that are really persevering and have their happy ending. And as far as like the romance part of it, this particular book I feel it's like part coming of age, part love story with a dash of foodie fiction and mother-daughter relationship. And I was trying to make this like a comfort, squishy read for right for me. And then I wanted it to be like something that people will read and say, okay, I can connect to something in the story. But all of them have their full arcs. And in the end, I wanted to show that a marginalized main character, show her voice, and then show that marginalized voices and characters can have happy endings too.
Yes, which is so important. I mean, especially at this time right now where, Asian Americans of all parts of the Asian diaspora are under attack in our country right now. I mean, there is just a really, there's a rightfully important discussion going on around that. And it's so important to see positive representations, and fun representations of all people of all ethnicities and sexualities and, everything, like diversity is just so important right now. It's important to have these stories in every aspect. It's important, to have serious like books examining kind of the underlying structural things about this. And it's also important to examine these issues in a really fun way, which your book does. I mean, your book does not shy away. There's that common misconception that a light read implies that there's no emotional depth, and there's so much emotional depth. I mean, you really do tackle systemic racism, you tackle sexism, all of these things in the context of the workplace, but also just in general life. I mean, as Jess starts a food-oriented business and a Korean food-oriented business. And, there's a lot of concern about, is it going to be whitewashed? Is there going to be, is it going to be exploited, particularly because her Korean mother is involved, and like, is she going to be exploited in any way? And Jess is kind of marrying her identity as both, her Korean heritage, her American upbringing, all of these things of like what makes her this unique person. that I think is a relatable story. Is that something that, is something that you experienced, as a Korean American author? And kind of what, if anything, do you hope to contribute to this ongoing, struggle to create a more diverse and representative society? I know that's a big question, but like in this little, in your specific context of like the rom-com world, like
Yes.
kind of what do you hope to add to the discussion?
What most people will hopefully get from this at the very, like, I don't want to say surface level, but hopefully they'll come away with this saying it's a lighthearted, enjoyable read that's a good summer read. And so I did want it to be entertaining first and foremost. Just again, it was a comfort right for me, so I wanted it to be, have a lot of movement forward, it be fast paced enough to pull you in, have characters that had very distinct personalities that you're like, but be relatable, and you're like, I know a person like that.
Yeah.
But I did, and I do like to tackle some heavy hitting issues. And I think you'll see that in all of my books that I've released so far, that it either tackles racism, sexism, or both. And what I wanted to do here is, I think people have heard the conversation. Maybe it's on the news, or you've read it. You've heard a blip about it on social media, and it sort of like happens to people, but I don't really know people like that. What I wanted to do is like the message is out there. There's discourse, but I wanted to bring humor to it. So maybe if people can have it delivered in a different way, that and packaged differently, that maybe it will change the conversation, or at least in your mind shift perception, so that you have a different impression at the end. Like, I didn't think about racism, sexism, either in the workplace or just in general, and just have that take a step back and think about it a little bit deeper. But because it's delivered with humor, and I try to handle it with a like lighthearted touch, that hopefully it's just more, I don't maybe digestible, so that you can just kind of absorb what I'm trying to get across in a humorous way, and maybe take away more depth and meaning from the book.
Well, I certainly got that as a reader. I mean, like that, I think you've accomplished that goal. And I see so many great things in this book too. I mean, the cast of characters in general is very diverse. There's a lot of women supporting women. There's a lot of, like really great stuff that we love to see it, and the other component of it that I love to see in rom-coms. And I'm just so happy that like, this is where we're going with books in general, is the representation of the romantic relationship. And I love that there is, between Jess and Daniel, there is enough friction and conflict to create an interesting story that you can't necessarily anticipate, like, how this is going to work out. Are they going to get together? Are they not going to get together? Which is obviously like, that's how you build a compelling relationship that people want to read about. Like, you can't know on page one that they're definitely going to end up together, or else it's not really that fun, right? It's a little more fun if there's conflict. But you do a great job of balancing that conflict with creating a relationship that is inherently healthy and that we can want to root for, as opposed to like, oh my God, please don't end up with him, because like this is horrible, which is like kind of how relationships have been portrayed for so long in books and film and TV. This idea that like we all grew up with of like, well, if we hate each other, then we must be well suited, which is like the worst way to pick a partner like ever. Like that's just so bad. And I'm curious about how, you went about kind of designing a counterpart for Jess in Daniel, and how you achieve that balance, and whether that was something that you consciously thought about and whether that's something you think about in general as you build relationships.
I do think about the balance of what part of the story will be a coming of age story, because you will always get coming of age stories with my books. It's just, and I think it's a factor of just having being brought up in an Asian household where, I don't want to say there's like this delayed kind of development in on the romantic side, but it's like your parents are telling you all through college, like, don't date, don't date, don't date, and then as soon as you graduate, when are you getting married? And you're like, I don't get, how does this happen? How does this work? I don't understand. And that I've heard that story for so many other people that are Asian American or Asian, that you just really don't understand how that is possible to just make that jump. And so I personally love to write sort of on the sweeter side, the sweeter romances, because my characters are usually awkward nerds. And and when there's awkward nerds finding new love, there's not going to be this suave, smooth, like, oh, he's so hot, she's so hot, let's just tango and get to bed. It's just not how it's ever going to be developed. And it might be based on my own experience because I'm an awkward nerd. But when it comes to actually people and relationships, when you have two awkward nerds together, that's when to me, it's just a hilarious kind of thing. Like, what else can go wrong when it comes to two people trying to figure it out, because it's not going to be in any way going to work very easily, right? Because one person has like maybe no experience, the other person has a little bit, or something of that nature, where it's just they're twisting and turning, but it's not like how you would see it in a normal novel. I wanted to talk about that type of person because there's a lot of awkward, nerdy people out there. I'd like to say that they need representation too. But as far as see, awkward nerds unite. But I really think that that isn't like something that the sweet romance mixed with the awkward nerd makes sense to me. And again, I don't think that hot steamy scene can happen for the way I write the characters. So the way that it develops for it's an arc, but again, they're just having tension and conflict like most romantic leads, but it's just a different level and probably like more cringy. But I again, that's where the comedy comes in, because I love writing this type of tension.
Yeah. I mean, like, what, like, romance isn't kind of cringy on some level? Like, I don't care how, like, sexy and hot you are. Like, I feel like it's always, like, there's always that element. So, again, feels very, very true to life.
But in this book, though, the main character, the love interest, I should say, he was based on the idea of this middle school rivalry that I had with my brother and I had a rivalry with a set of brothers who are pastor sons, which is sort of like how this idea came about. And they still are, I don't want to name them, but like they are doing quite well still professionally. And I'm like, I will never win, but I will talk about it in this novel. But so they did it is sort of like the idea of them have always been like, oh, that would be funny to write about, because I would love for this rivalry to have gone so far back that it's like illogical almost, that this person still has harboring feelings of anger toward this person. But a lot of people have related to that, saying like, oh, I have this person from middle school that when I run into them, or like, I still don't like that person because they were a certain way. And I wanted to explore that too, because I thought that would just be a kind of a fun little take on like childhood friends, but not like childhood friends turn to romantic, but it's like childhood rivals. That's like a funnier, I think, take on that type of trope, or versus
very true. Like, I mean, we all have like our old childhood nemesis that we're like, oh, I just still don't like that person. And like, it's not like I want bad things to happen to them. I just want better things to happen to me. Right? Like, that's like, it's like, I just want to win. Like, you want to win the game, which I feel like is very normal and human.
Right.
There, I said it. I'm not perfect. Like, like I always want to win. I always want to win. And we have so many great questions coming in from the audience. I want to make sure we get to a couple of them. But I just want to talk one more food. We got to talk about food, because like, I mean, like, if anyone watches these interviews, they will know that like pretty much of like the books that I come across, I'm like, is there a food element? Like, how much can I read about food in this book? Like, that is like pretty much like, that's basically like my criteria for like choosing books. I'm like, how much food is in this book? And can I eat vicariously through this book while also eating in real life. But love, like, this book is so food centric. Jess's whole business is centered around Korean cooking, and she and her mom have this great Korea cooking show, and like it's so great. It's just so fun. And her business is about, creating a way for business professionals to cook more at home. I think we're all cooking more at home. We're all doing this thing, like you said, the meal kits. It is really actually a good idea, and you should probably do this business as well. But what role does food play in your life, and why does it? Why did you choose to put it at the forefront of your written work as well?
Yeah. Well, I knew from the beginning that I wanted to have a business for Jessie where something goes wrong, meaning, like, you have everything that looks like it's shaping up to be
Yeah.
successful, and then I knew that I wanted to involve the mother. And just based on my own experience, I was trying to think, like, where would a mother be qualified to, like,
Mhm.
kind of give advice in something for an adult
Yeah.
child, in a way that was believable, and you did kind
Yeah.
of see them as an expert. And in my own life, my mother is like a top level chef, in my opinion. When she was, cooking for her Korean community back in Nashville, she was
Yeah.
always the one that they would make suggestions on what she should bring. Like, it's a potluck, but we would really like if you brought, X, Y, or Z, and those were her specialty dishes. And so, since I was little, my mom has always been cooking, and she was a working mom, and then would cook on mostly weekends, and like we'd eat throughout the week. But when I graduated from college, I started trying to observe her more, and just to
Mhm.
understand, like, what she puts in the food, because I couldn't replicate a lot of the things
Yeah.
that she was making. Or I would buy it at a restaurant; it would just taste different than my mom's home cooking. So. Um, I've just been paying attention a lot more,
Mhm.
especially in the last, probably before the pandemic, but like as I've gotten older. Um, and she cooks with like handfuls, fistfuls, sprinkles, and dashes, and I'm like, wait, how much is that? And what did you just
Mhm.
throw in there? Like, she doesn't have like this pristine like work environment where she has little bowls of like things set out. She just literally grabs stuff from the fridge and then dumps, and then moves it back, or brings in oil or something and just like tosses it in. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it's so fast, lightning fast.
Mhm.
But lately I've been kind of like, again, I've been watching her cook and then trying to get at home and refining it, because she just won't flat out tell me. So I have to
Mhm.
try it with trial and error. So I've been able to mostly replicate her dishes, mainly around soups and, just some of the stir fried things. And
Yep.
it's been really like, it's been like an accomplishment when I'm able to like make it almost as good as hers. Um,
That's
so it's like,
awesome.
I feel like because it's like, check, I got that. So I've been, and then I've been cooking a little bit more at home, more Korean food at home, like
Mhm.
in general. So that's sort of how it came about to be in the novel, is like just my own experience.
Is there a special recipe? Like, is there a recipe or a dish that has like really special meaning to your family or your mom that you make at home that you included in the book, or maybe that you wanted to include in the book but didn't quite make it, or something you kind of discovered through writing the book?
My mom's favorite, the favorite. Okay, so first of all, in general, my mom makes fun of my food taste because she says I like farm people food. I don't know what that means, but it means like super simple, like not gourmet at all. And so she'll make these things, and I've figured out again how to make them. And I was like, oh, it's actually pretty easy. So I think that's what she means, is like the simple to make food. And that's like this there's these garlic chives, and then you put it in batter, and you can make a pancake out of it. And that is my favorite food. And it has like four ingredients, and that's it. And
Mhm.
she's made it since I was little. And I mean, I can make it too, but I like how she cooks it good because it's from her. Um,
Yeah.
so that one is like not even worth putting in a recipe book, because it's literally like four things. Um, but the other one is, she makes this black bean noodle that you buy the noodle at the store, but the actual sauce, she just makes it in a way that I can't replicate it. And I've watched her, and I don't know that I'm missing something. So maybe after this, I'll go just watch her again. But it's black bean noodle on top of noodles, and it just makes it in a way that it's different than the restaurants. The restaurants make it a
Yeah.
little bit too oily, and
Mm.
you order it, it's just like shiny and whatever. I was like, my mom
Mm.
isn't shiny. So that is her specialty. It's called jjajangmyeon, and it's very good. And we asked for it. She says she's sick of it, so she doesn't like to cook it, and as well as she does. So we beg her like every birthday. We go, can you please make it for my birthday? And it's just hilarious because to her it's like, oh, I don't want to make this
I
dish.
don't want to make this again. Like, I feel that, and I feel for people. Like, I'm the person in my family who people are like, "Can you please write this down?" And I'm like, I honestly don't know. It's just like you got to taste it until it tastes the right way. And like, I can tell you, like, yeah, I think it's like a cup of this, but like, you got to kind of play around with it. I think that's something that's like very cookie, like if you're like, and it's hard to write down. And it's also hard to like to totally like, I'm also the person who would like call my mom in a panic at college and be like, can you please tell me how you make your tomato sauce, like your tomato sauce exactly, like exactly, because I'm doing it and it doesn't taste like yours, it tastes like, but it's interesting how those recipes kind of in families like get passed down and evolve. And
there is one recipe in the book.
Yes,
I will say for kimchi fried rice. So that is in it, and that's one I made a lot during the pandemic. So that's why I wanted to include it. It's like my comfort go-to food, and it's very easy for me to make because it's just like I have all the ingredients and it's just easy to whip up. And so I included that in this book.
Nobody ever went wrong with a kimchi fried rice, right?
Yeah, you can't really mess it up. It's really hard to mess up. So even if you have some sort of imbalance, some other flavor will just dominate, but it might still be good. You don't know.
Love it, love it, love it. I'm going to take a couple questions from the audience, and this is a cool question from Margaret. Can we talk about covers and colors? What's Suzanne's opinion of pink? Because obviously, like, this is a very primary color oriented cover. Any thoughts on cover design? How much input do you have in cover design? And like, have you ever felt like, do you feel like the cover kind of captures the book? And have you ever had any sort of any thoughts that maybe didn't align with the direction? And if so, how do you deal with that? Or do you just love it?
So it's easier to talk about the previous version because the previous version informed this cover. So the not previous version, but the last my debut novel, adult novel called Loathe at First Sight, and it was bright yellow. And in the background, you could see video game controllers because it was about the video game industry.
Yep.
And the title was really bold. It had a couple on the front, but they're not facing, the woman's not facing him and she has her arms crossed. And it took a while to get to that concept just because they had a lot of ideas, but it didn't quite capture like the spirit of the book because it's a very punchy, edgy kind of like book in terms of just getting a message about the male dominated video game industry. So it's just a totally different kind of harder hitting book. So to keep this in the same family, when this book was developed, the tone was a little bit, I don't want to say softer, but it was definitely a lighter touch in the humor. But some things that carried over, I don't know if you could see, but can you see the Korean food in the background?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. So that
I don't know if I actually noticed that until you just figured it out, which is
something that
now it looks so obvious to me. But but like I spend I don't look at the cover that much. I just read the book and then
I mean, it's not, a lot of people don't see it, but because it carried over from the first, the first book, the idea of like showing kind of what the industry is in the background, we wanted to keep that here. And it's a different, again, not the bold, letters, all caps letters as the first book. So, again, it was in the same family, and Jess and Daniel were pretty much the same as far as like when this was handed to me, it was like maybe 90% as it is. We changed her shirt a little bit and like made sure that they kind of reflected the book's tone a lot more specifically, just because it was a little bit different. But overall, and I love that it was blue. I don't know why, but I've always wanted a blue cover. And then the reddish reddish pink really popped. I like pink a lot. I think if it's used in a way that is I mean, it almost like it depends on like how it's designed and what color of pink and the actual design of fonts too. But I don't shy away from pink. I actually like that color a lot.
Me too. Me too. And this is a question from Anissa, which is great because if you were to write in another genre, which one would you hop to and why? Which obviously you already write in two genres. You write YA and you write adult contemporary. And I kind of want to add to this question of like, do you like, what was the choice behind writing in both genres? Because you're doing so basically simultaneously. And it seems like maybe you switch back and forth, like you write a YA and then you write an adult contemporary. And what is that like for you? And do you ever have any difficulties with switching? And do you ever have, do you find one easier to write in versus the other? Or like, what is that like for you? I love this question.
Yeah. About so like, there's kind of two ways to look at it. One is like, have I been able to kind of switch between the projects? And the answer is no. I am a very linear writer and a very linear thinker. So I have to finish the YA project and then start on the adult. And I have never actually in the last 2 years been able to really toggle them. And and luckily my agent knows this. So she will, so he will say like, she's working on the YA now, and then we'll slip, you know, just, or she's working on adult edits, so she can't deliver, blah, blah, blah. So, it, you know, he helps, you know, kind of make sure that he has my back on that because he knows that that's how my brain works. So it's been good in that way. But yeah, I can't really flip. But I've thought about trying, but then I was like, well, this kind of works for now. So I'm not going to break what's working. And as far as, so age groups wise, it's true. I have to switch between, after projects, I switch gears. And to me, the challenge of moving from YA to adult or is just to make sure that I have the voice right. And when it comes to that, it's incorporating also life context. So when you are, you know, a workplace comedy, for example, and from a romantic perspective, I have to be very realistic of like what they've experienced in their real lifetime versus somebody that's 14 or 13 or 16 or, you know, maybe going on the verge of being 18. Like, what are their realistic life experiences? And how do I make sure that how they talk and how they think really is, you know, within that set of years. But workplace comedies, you know, fast forward, add another 10 years, you just have a lot more that goes on, but also a lot of buildup when it comes to like imposter syndrome or whatever it is. There's like, it's a lot deeper because it's just been in like, you know, had time to settle in and fester for a while. So I've, you know, I just make sure that I have that thought through before I just hop into a project. And then as far as like what I switch away from rom-com, my next book may potentially lean more women's fiction. Still trying to play with the balance of the coming of age part with the love story. So that balance may shift a little bit more toward coming of age. And then in general, I would love to write mysteries and thrillers, but have comedy in them. So I haven't seen much of that. And so anybody has any suggestions of stuff I can read? I literally have never seen it. I've read a ton of mysteries and thrillers in my spare time, like when I have spare time, because I like the pacing and learning from that. So that is something I would love to do. Like I love Jordan Peele's way of doing comedy and horror, like in a movie sense, and I would love to try that in fiction. I don't know how. But
that's exactly what I thought of when you said that, or like something like Knives Out or something, you know, like where like that kind of like that dark humor that it's comedy, but it's like, oh yeah, I think there'd be a huge market for that. Did you, so from the beginning, did you have this sense of I'm going to write YA and adult, or did you start out saying I'm just going to write one? And what was it like kind of coming to the market as an author who was like, did you present yourself as I'm going to write both of these things? And You know, like was that from the get-go, or did that evolve over your year?
When I was looking for an agent, I knew I wanted one that could bridge different age categories.
Yeah.
So I knew from the beginning that although I was writing adult at the time, I knew I would want to eventually try um, young adult. I hadn't really thought much about like middle grade or picture books or chapter books or anything, but definitely YA was something that I had thought of. So I was looking for an agent that could handle both adult and YA. My agent does both, and he's wonderful. And so I'm just trying to, I've always had that part in mind, even though I hadn't written anything at the time when I was looking for an agent.
And I mean, oh gosh, I'm like, we're already like at our time limit. I could just talk all day. This is like every time, like I'm like supposed to keep these to like a half an hour, and I'm like, we'll just talk for like 4 hours. It's fine. Really quickly before we go, like, how do you keep up the pace? Like, you are just like on the fast track. Like, I mean, literally, like I just cannot fathom putting out, like, I can't even get one book finished. Like I can hardly get one book finished, as opposed to like you've written 4. Like, what is your timeline, right? Like, for writing these books, and how do you keep up this pace? Like, what's you're on a macro level and a micro level? Like, I want to know like what's your day like for writing, and also like how long does it take you to like get a project finished?
Well, deadlines help where they scare you into turning something in. And so, and because I write linearly, I had to turn in my YA book so I wrote it in the spring and summer. And then when I turned that in, I had summer and part of the fall to write this book. So both books were fast tracked. But again, because I was not doing anything because I was at home all day, I did have a gap where I wasn't writing at all because I, like everyone else in that.
Was it like an hour? Like when you say a gap, was it like 20 minutes when you were writing?
I put on a timer and it was only 45 minutes. So I gave a 25-minute break. No, I did have a month and a half off, actually. I couldn't write anything. I tried. I didn't even try, actually. What I do is I say I just need to be a writer today. And that could mean, just doing stuff on my website, and then looking at, updating my bio or whatever it is, like these like writerly tasks that I've put off, these small like check to do things that I can check off. So when I'm not writing, I always switch to some sort of writing thing that I can do that's like easy to deliver, and it's not like that hard. It's like, like I scheduled my new author headshots. Like, to me, that's still part of the writing thing to do. And so I got those done. And then I have to mail some things, and, they're all related to what I do as an author. So those things I was doing just to keep busy. I did a lot of Canva. I love working Canva, but overall, because I had to deliver a book of a certain length by, and this book was 83,000 when I turned it in. I am, unlike some of your other authors who are like, I can't do the word count. I am okay with the word count goals. And that's because, I know we don't have that much time, so I'll try to be fast about it.
You're fine. We're good.
When I was working in corporate America in my marketing job, I'd worked there for 3.5 years. And my husband and I were trying to figure out, could we make this writing thing work? Because I was doing it in the evenings from when everyone went to bed. So it was like 9:30 to 11:30. I was just doing my writing thing while I had a job, while I was also parenting. And it was just not, I was able to do, and my goal then was to do a page a day, because if you write a page a day, 5 days a week, you can have a book at the end of the year, because that is the right number of pages, right? But then he was like, with the revising, whatever, it's going to take you 2 years probably to finish this. Would you be able to write full time? And I was like, that's a good question. So I actually asked my workplace at the time, during the summer, can I have Fridays off? And they granted me summer Fridays off, prorated pay, of course. And during those Fridays, I was just trying to see if I could do a word count goal, within a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
What I learned is I'm only productive 4 hours. And I also learned that I can actually be pretty hyper focused, because those 4 hours are intense 4 hours. And the other time it's just like useless. I really just, it's like, that's literally all I can do. So because I tested it out for a whole summer, I knew how to roll out, like, kind of like how, if I did this full time, how that would look. So I do write full time now, and I ramp upwards. So when I start a new project, I do like 250 words a day, and then a few times a week, and then you ramp up to 500, 750, 1,000. And then for me to actually hit my end goal, I know my maximum word count is 1,200. I can write more, but they'll be garbage.
I love the way you think about this. I mean, like, that's kind of like usually, like, in a creative project, like, that's like 4 hours is about the limit of like how anyone, some people maybe are like superhuman, but like 4 hours is a pretty good chunk of like, can you be creative in this time and like really hyper focus and really be in like that deep flow state of creating. And gosh,
I was like snacking and grabbing, like, having 6 lunches, and like, messaging friends and doing social media. And then I was like, okay, that took up a certain amount of time. So I've, like, again, 4 hours of kind of writing related, whether that meant reading to like craft books, and then writing words from what I learned, or, taking some notes that and compile them, and then write a scene from them.
Yeah. I mean, and that's it. I love hearing about this, and I love, especially from women who are also mothers. As a new mom myself, and this is, I always bring this question up because I do hate I always say I hate the question about how do you balance it, and like, but it is. I do think it's really important to normalize, not just being women who have jobs and also have children, but also women who have creative careers, because there's that thing of the artist of like needs to be like an angry drunk old man who is like, like just a loner and like this thing. And it's nice to know that it's possible, like, and that, I like to keep that going all the time with people, and I like to give people hope, mostly myself. But
I think you can do small goals. I think that's how I've been able to do it. Is just when I did the page a day, I was able to write a book in a year, and then I realized I can use that sort of knowledge to figure out how to, like, which ways I can swing, hours and time to see how, what my maximum threshold is, and that's how I ended up where I am now.
I love it. And clearly make it faster, because you are just like cranking them out. What are you working on right now? And real quick, and because we do have to go, but real quick, what's next from you? You have a holiday book coming out, right?
Yes, I have a holiday book coming out next fall. It's a young adult romantic comedy. It's untitled at the moment, but it will soon have a title. And it's about 2 Asian American teenagers. They have rival mall businesses, seasonal mall businesses. And one is a photographer at Santa's Village, and the other one works at this virtual reality Santa extravaganza, like North Pole extravaganza. And they're next to each other. They compete for business, and their parents both own food court restaurants. One's a Korean restaurant, the other's Chinese. Cool. They hate each other. And they realize that the mall is about to close and be turned into condos, so they have to band together to save the mall.
I love it. Oh my God, that's so great. And also like malls. Oh, love it.
And I had to do a lot of mall research, I just basically ate everything in the food court, to do research for this.
I love it. Suzanne, you're so much fun. Thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to give a shout out to an independent bookstore of where people can buy your book? Maybe some signed copies or?
So, wow, what a great opportunity. So Parnassus Bookstore is where I did one of my events. They're the local indie in Nashville, where I actually mentioned it in this book. Yeah. And they're wonderful people. And Mysterious Galaxies, where I had my event last night, they have signed copies. Parnassus has signed book plates. Cool. And Mysterious Galaxy, also wonderful people. And then I think locally, I've done events with the Rip Bodice. So they've also like terrific, wonderful store owners, and the community there is great. So those are sort of the ones that are top of mind
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Love it. Suzanne, thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations again on So We Meet Again, and all of your other amazing books that have come out during the pandemic. I continue to be in awe of you. I think you're a really interesting writer, and like everything, the books themselves and just also like kind of how you approach this is super cool. Everyone, please follow Suzanne on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. Thank you to everyone for joining us and for your great questions. I'm sorry that we couldn't get to more of them. We probably could have gone on for like 6 hours talking about this. But Suzanne, hopefully we'll see you again on A Mighty Blaze, and we'll see all of you next time on Lit Chick next Friday.